Hello, IEEE-HKN community, and welcome to the 15th episode of the HKN Connection on the HKN Advisor Experience. I'm your host, Joseph Green, one of the 2022 HKN student governors and chair of the Graduate Student Activities Subcommittee. And over this episode, we will discuss how individuals become advisors, how chapters work with their advisors to create continuity in the collegiate environments, and how advisors help bridge HKN to our local community. Joining us today are two prominent advisors and volunteers within our communities, Jennifer Marley and Michael Benson. To briefly introduce our guests, Jennifer earned her MS and PhD degrees in systems engineering from the University of Michigan in 2014 and 2017, respectively, after which she joined the faculty of Valparaiso University as an assistant professor of electrical and computer engineering, where she currently holds the Frederick F. Jenney Jr. Professorship of Emerging Technology. Jennifer first joined IEEE-HKN in 2010 as an undergraduate student inductee of the Beta Eta chapter located at North Carolina State University. She now serves as the faculty advisor of the New Road chapter at Valparaiso University. She's the 2020 recipient of the IEEE-HKN C. Holmes McDonald Outstanding Teaching Award and was selected for excellence as a teacher, her contribution to scholarship of teaching, and her mentoring of undergraduate research students. She's been a member of IEEE and the IEEE Power and Energy Society since 2012. Since 2019, she has served on the board of the Calumet section of IEEE in the following capacities: Student Activities Chair, Publicity Chair, and Secretary. She is also our recently elected IEEE-HKN Region 3 to 4 Governor. Michael Benson is an advanced imaging research scientist at Maxar Technologies and is concluding his doctoral work at the University of Michigan's Radiation Laboratory in Ann Arbor, Michigan. A prior recipient of NASA's Earth and Space Science Fellowship, Michael's research interests include multimodal remote sensing of the environment with a focus on radar. Since 2013, Michael has served as a chapter advisor for the Beta Epsilon chapter at the University of Michigan. In this capacity, Michael has worked with 21 different groups of chapter officers and has helped them transition and thrive in their roles. Michael served for 5 years on the IEEE-HKN Board of Governors, 2 years as the Society's third student governor, and most recently as the governor for Region 3 and 4. During that time, he has aggressively represented the interests of the Society's students' membership and has successfully led the IEEE-HKN Ritual Committee, Membership and Chapter Committee, the Student Advisory Committee, and the Student Leadership Conference Coordination Committee. Thank you both for joining us today. Moving on to the topics of today's episode, both of you are dedicated HKN members who decided to step up and aid our chapters within your communities. What made you decide to take that step and become advisors? And we can start.
Sure, I can get us started.
Yeah, go ahead.
So my second year here at Valparaiso, our then department chair kind of tapped me on the shoulder, if you will, and asked if I'd like to be involved in Eta Kappa Nu. And I served as a co-advisor for 3 semesters. And during that time, kind of got to learn about what does Eta Kappa Nu do here, who are we, and got a little bit of experience with how one could be a faculty advisor. And then when he had an opportunity, he moved on. And so then I kind of took over as the remaining advisor there. And from there, it's just been really fun to help students grow in their leadership and to hear their ideas for where they want to take the department and ideas to contribute to the college, and also just to get to know students outside of a classroom. So it's been a really fun experience.
That's awesome. And how about yourself, Michael?
So a bit of a different track, but a similar outcome in the sense that for the Beta Epsilon chapter at the University of Michigan, the chapter has a couple faculty advisors, grad student advisors, and just alumni advisors in general. And I was asked about 10 years ago now at this point, if, during my graduate studies, if I was interested in serving as an advisor. The chapter really looked to different people that were involved with the chapter in one way, shape, or form. And if we had, a particular skill set. So for example, at that point, I was serving as the president of the graduate student body. I was also involved in a national organization representing graduate students and their interests in Washington, D.C. And the chapter thought that apparently my skill set could be useful potentially. So they offer, they suggested I might check it out. I did, and much like many other cases out there, really liked what the chapter was doing. I've been previously involved, but and I've really enjoy mentoring as well. So working with different generations of chapter officers to help transition them into their roles, to help them, have an understanding of where the chapter's been, not to say this is how you have to do it, but more to provide that context as they, chart their path forward. It's really just been rewarding, and I'm glad they asked, and I'm even more grateful that I said yes.
That's awesome. And it's great to hear a little bit more about your decision-making and becoming the advisor and start talking about the ramifications that you've been able to have as advisors themselves. To set the stage a little bit more for our organization, our chapters really have to navigate their own unique collegiate environments to bring with them their own coaches, histories, and idiosyncrasies, and then merge that perspective back into HKN. From this lens, what would you say is the primary role of advisors, and how do they help our chapters navigate their unique environments? And we can start with Michael.
Oh, okay. So the primary role of advisor, now this might be shocking, is to advise. Now, what that means can vary in context, but our advisors, whether they're a faculty advisor, an alumnus advisor, a grad student advisor, whatever it might be, is to provide some institutional memory for the chapter, right? Ideally, they're in that role for more than a few days or a month or even an academic term. So there's that, they're the bridge between different groups of officers, but also too, they perhaps have a bit more understanding of how the university, how the college, the department functions, right? Faculty advisors often are the bridge to help the chapter obtain the list of students that are academically eligible, right? And also help them navigate, the department. Where can they go to find this resource or that resource? Beyond that, though, they are individuals that are there to support the officers in the chapter at large. So people come to advisors with questions, and hopefully advisors offer advice.
No, I appreciate that that down-to-earth perception, and I like the simplicity that you go at it with. That it's like, yes, each one of you as advisors are bringing your own unique perception with you, and each of those perspectives are only going to aid the chapter just by sharing your experiences. But to build off of that idea, Jennifer, I'd like to turn the stage over to you and ask you the same question.
Sure. And I have a very similar view in that I view the advisor role as very supervisory. I'm a relatively hands-off advisor as far as it's my opinion that the chapter belongs to the students and the members, not just the students, but it's not my job to tell them what to do. My job, I think, is to help the students realize what they want Eta Kappa Nu to be here, and to listen, as far as the students often have an amazing perspective on what is the department, what does the college need, and also what would they like. So sometimes it can be a simple social event that they've identified, this is a really stressful time for us. Maybe Eta Kappa Nu can step up and provide kind of an outlet for that. And also the institutional memory as far as what has worked well, or sometimes I will come out with the opposite perspective of, sometimes I'll hear an idea and I'll say, I love that idea. Here's what struggles we've had in the past trying to do that. And so I can kind of be that person who helps them take steps along the way, and kind of that continuity over multiple years to build a vision for what do we want to do and how can we improve upon. Because if you're a student member or you're a student leader, you're here for a year, you may not know the behind the scenes conversations of, we wanted to do this, but here's why that didn't work, or just kind of that reflection over what have we done and where do we want to go. But it really is a lot of connections, whether that's to people in the department, whether that's to speakers that we want to bring for different areas, resources, and it's really just kind of listening a lot of the time.
No, I really appreciate these perceptions. And I think one aspect that it would be worth touching upon again is both of you have very much provided the perception that advisors are here to support the chapters, and they should be seen as almost a chief area of support, whether it's determining a long-term vision or the short-term execution. I was wondering if you agree with that statement, or if there's anything you would like to add on to that. And I'll leave that open to whoever wants to take it first.
after you.
Yeah, I definitely agree with it. I think that it's helping guide, but it's not guiding yourself on that. So I wholeheartedly agree with that summary.
Awesome.
And I will say ditto, and just add in one note that at the, and this is jumping ahead a smidge, but at the society level, I chair our chapters and ritual committee. Jennifer chairs our advisor development support subcommittee on the committee. We're doing a lot to help support our chapters broadly, and advisors are a key piece of that because they are that principal support, right? Advisors are on the ground in the trenches and available to the chapters. And I think Jennifer made a really good point. It's not just the students, alumni members, et cetera, are still, truly valued. Now, we have, if you're listening to this and you're an HKN student, you might say, well, I've never seen my advisor. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're not involved, right? They could interact with the chapter president or maybe the corresponding secretary. So I would ask. The other thing too is different advisors have different approaches, right? So some of our advisors are perhaps more hands-on than even what Jennifer suggested in her role. Others are probably less so. And it really, we say that HKN NU is a community of communities. Each community has a lot that binds us together, but there's also individuality and uniqueness too. So if what your chapter has works for you, great. If it doesn't, then definitely we encourage you to reach out to any of the three of us and beyond as well. And we can help both provide some resources as well as guidance for both for everyone in the chapter, advisors included, to see what might be possible. But again, just if your experience doesn't directly match what Jennifer or I have talked about, that doesn't make it bad or wrong or anything else. It just is a testament to our just the nature of our society and each community within being ever so slightly different, but still fundamentally the same.
The other thing that I would add
Go
to
ahead.
that real quick is that I think my role I've seen change over the past few years, and that it depends on the composition of the chapter. So some years,
Gotcha.
if I have a brand new e-board, I may be a little more hands-on in the beginning as far as, well, what is your role? What can we do? What have we done? But if, this year, for example, I have an experienced e-board, so my role is much more listening centric than it's been in the past because they're already a cohesive group. They have ideas that they come in. So my role evolves as well over time.
Absolutely. If I could add to that.
Yeah, of course.
For a second, Joe. Advisors really, advisors need to be kept in the loop, right? So such that, if myself or Jennifer, if we see something come in through email or our chapter GroupMe or Slack or whatever the individual chapter uses, we can offer, we can say, oh, that's a great idea, or have you thought about this, or whatever it might be. You don't want someone to be kind of out in the cold and then all of a sudden ask 15 questions and have no idea the context, right? So that's a key piece. But also too, when you keep an advisor in the loop, it enables them to truly have that dynamic type of advising, right? So where there's a need for more engagement, they can provide it. And as that diminishes, or if you have a really strong set of officers or chairs or whatever you might have, then the advisor can just sit back and continue to read things as they come in, but really take that kind of hands-off approach.
I really appreciate this. I think a message that we're starting to formulate here is, each advisor is coming with their own experiences, whether that's with the university, the local community, or HKN as a whole. And through that, they provide different resources to the chapter. And especially based off of the current state of the chapter, really a good advisor, if you will, can take a look at the state of the chapter and really help define what exact role they can best play for it. And building off of that idea of fitting different perspectives into the chapter to aid them, HKN really only requires you to have one faculty advisor, but a common practice is chapters actually have multiple advisors of multiple different backgrounds. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, whether your chapter does it or successful practice you've heard about integrating multiple advisors, and what's the benefit of taking that path? And I'll start with Michael.
Sure. It absolutely is a best practice for chapters to have multiple advisors. including multiple faculty advisors too. In particular, if depending on the academic structure at your institution, if you're inducting from, let's say it's a separate department of computer science, electrical computer engineering, maybe some data science is an allied field or anything else like that, try to have an advisor from each of those individual units too, because they'll have different perspectives. Even if you're only inducting from a single department, having multiple advisors is never a bad idea, because again, like Joe, like you said, different perspectives and also too different availability, right? So, one advisor might be preparing for a major conference or something and have limited time this week, but advisor B might not be doing that, right? They might have a different area of focus within the discipline, so their timing is different, and they might have more time to aid if needed. So it really is a best practice, let alone graduate student advisors, alumni advisors, people working in industry that might want to connect with the chapter, etc. Best case scenario, honestly, is, and we provide for this in the template chapter operations manual on hkn.org. I just point this out, but chapters should seek out people that are interested in HKN. First off, right? You don't want someone that a name on paper is not going to help you here. Someone that ideally can come to a meeting every now and then, perhaps has some ideas for different types of service activities or a social event that you might want to try, and also too someone particularly on the faculty side that has an understanding of how their department, their college, the institution as a whole operates, and can help connect you and your successors to resources and to people too. So absolutely best practice.
I like it. Thank you for that perspective. And Jennifer, I turn the same question over to you.
Absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree again with that. So I've done it kind of both ways, where in the beginning I was a co-advisor, and then now it's just me. I will say that here we're small enough that although I am the only advisor, we have plenty of faculty who are still involved in Eta Kappa Nu, and that's also something that's really helpful, is having that relationship with your chair, ideally with your dean, who sees the value of Eta Kappa Nu. So even if it's just me, let's say, attending the e-board meetings, we still have other faculty who come to the larger events or things like that, that you can build that continuity. The other benefit that I see of having multiple advisors is not only availability, but it's much less intimidating when you come on as a co-advisor, because someone's there to help you, versus if you're stepping up and I don't know what my role is, or I don't know how to do this. So having that experience of the first semester or the first year, it was very much learning, well, how do we go through this? And, we ended up having pretty different advising styles, but we could ensure that one of us was at each e-board meeting, or one of us was at each event. And I think that also means a lot to our members, in that somebody's here because we care about it, because we are interested in it. So finding however many people that is, with different perspectives and with different reach too. So I have a different reach as far as students than my other faculty members. And so when it comes time to get the word out about, well, what is this invitation that I just received? I can leverage that differently. And it also helps us with not really recruitment, but when you want to share with people, who are we and what do we do? You can do it in an authentic and an organic way of, here's this invitation. Let me tell you a little bit about what you might be involved in here. So it's super helpful to have multiple people helping lead that chapter.
No,
absolutely.
Go ahead, Michael.
Okay. I was going to say that's a phenomenal segue too, just to note that for all of our chapters, if there are faculty members in your, say, your host department or one of your host departments that are not currently HKN, you conduct them, right? We encourage it. One, it helps create a great crop for potential future advisors, co-advisors, what have you. But fundamentally, if someone is a faculty member in a host department, they're worthy of recognition and the honor that Eta Kappa Nu bestows. In so doing, too, like Jennifer said, they then also can become nodes in a distribution network for things that's happening in the chapter. For if someone gets an invitation letter, they say, oh, this professor that I really like, they're an HKN. right? That's a big deal. On the flip side, though, even if they're not an official formal advisor, if someone, let's say you're in a class or a lab or whatever it might be, and something in the chapter is on your mind, if you're an officer or a chapter member, if you know that, hey, this instructor, whether it's a TA or the professor more so is HKN, you might go up to that person after class and say, hey, do you have a second to talk? I have a question. What do you think about this? Right? So there's a multiplicative effect here that even if you don't have multiple formal advisors or co-advisors, and you should, we encourage it, but even if not, by creating that groundwork of HKN membership in the professoriate, it really does help in a variety of ways, such that things percolate up, people get questions answered, and also too, it really just goes to show that HKN is a real thing, right? And obviously we are, but the fact that all these people that I look up to and respect, took the time, they are HKN. I think I want to join them in that. So it really checks multiple boxes and is just really beneficial.
And the other thing with that is that if you have multiple faculty who are involved in it, it's also on our minds. So when there's an opportunity in the department or something like that, if I'm a member, then it's not to say that I'm not thinking about other organizations as well, but it's on the forefront of my mind of when I see something, oh, this would be a really great fit for Eta Kappa Nu.
Yeah.
And as a faculty, we will have conversations like this too, of somebody wants to come to campus. What organization does it make sense to kind of help connect them with? Maybe it's Eta Kappa Nu, maybe it's not. But if other people know what that is, I don't have to be the one who's the only one helping that.
No, and I appreciate that. I think we see a couple of different benefits emerge from this conversation when it comes to investing in multiple advisors, and at the very least, multiple people in your local community who can support the chapter. You strengthen the chapter through multiple opportunities and experiences. You strengthen your local community by building bridges through HKN across these different compartmentalized aspects of your university, and you strengthen your advisors by giving them tools to learn, intermingle and chat and succeed. And that's only going to help the chapter in the process. I think I have one last question on this topic. I'll direct it at Michael. Let's say a chapter has gone through and elected an advisor, or has just chosen someone they would like to elect as an advisor. Could you briefly walk us through the process they would need to take to formalize that appointment and report it to HKN?
Absolutely. I think this goes without saying, but we'll say it anyway just to be complete. Make sure the person agrees to serve, preferably before you elect or select. But once that's done, if you visit hkn.org, click on the members page link in the upper right. You can basically go to chapter operations. You'll see a link to report chapter officers and advisors. Go there. You will log into that site with your IEEE credentials. As a reminder, everyone that inducts into IEEE Eta Kappa Nu as a student becomes an IEEE student member. So perks of that, you get an IEEE login, access to phenomenal resources. So you log in, the site's called vTools, and then you can go in, you just need that person's IEEE membership number, and you can go ahead and report them as an HKN chapter advisor. If they're a faculty member, you can report them as an HKN faculty advisor. We have both separate roles, same abilities, but at the same point, it helps us differentiate this one person, these 5 people, these are members of the faculty, and these others are, anything else. Could be from industry, grad students, could be alumni, what have you. So it's really easy, takes all of probably a minute with 30 seconds of that waiting for your connection to go through to the site. I would just say, just make sure you do have the advisor elect or designates IEEE member number. That'll just make things really simple.
Awesome. And I think you bring up one good point. We focused a lot on university personnel as advisors, but one aspect you mentioned in there is, if there's anyone you see as a potential aid to your chapter, they can become advisors. Maybe it's a past e-board member that's sticking in the local area or continuing with an advanced degree on the community. They can be an advisor and bring with them all the connections and resources they gained over the course of their years of leadership. It can be someone who's invested from you from a local company that's a longtime supporter of your chapter. And with that, they bring all their corporate connections. It can be a graduate student or someone in higher ed who can bring these unique communities to your chapter as well. So I think it is really important to reiterate that the ward is your oyster when it comes to who you want as your advisor. But to move on, I think we've talked a lot about advisors within our collegiate communities. Another important role of advisors is advisors within HKN. So to dive into that topic a little bit more, what do you see as the role of an advisor within HKN as a whole? How can advisors affect more than just their chapter? And how can advisors help link their chapter to other IEEE and HKN resources out there? And I'll open up the floor by asking Jenny that question.
Sure. Now, I will start here by saying I'm relatively new to forming this bridge and my role. I'm still learning about it, which is an exciting point to be at. But where I see myself in terms of fitting in the bigger picture is much like my role as a chapter advisor is kind of that connection to the department. I see it as building that connection to the larger community. So whether that's building connections to other chapters or other faculty advisors, I am a member of other professional societies, which with that, you know, even just telling students about those societies to encourage them to explore them, or maybe it's connecting with people who could give a talk here and their skills match the interests of what our students want. But I think it's just knowing what resources come with Eta Kappa Nu and then helping form that bridge between the chapter and the larger community.
Awesome. And Michael, I'll ask you the same question.
A fantastic answer from Jenny. I would just say that we are a community of communities. And as I said earlier, each chapter is different from every other chapter, though there's a lot that binds us together. Also, each campus is different, right? Each academic structure is different, and so on and so forth. So the role of an advisor, whether faculty or otherwise, in a larger context, is the same as it is for the chapter: to be informed, to listen, to make yourself knowledgeable about resources and opportunities available. You know, big HKN or the society as a whole, we host a student leadership conference, the HKN Experience, Pathways to Industry. The last few years, we've had a graduation celebration. There are awards, scholarships, all sorts of things that are available either directly through HKN or through a you know, other avenue within IEEE that we promote and encourage our members to apply to. It's important for advisors to be aware of those, and we take a number of opportunities to communicate with advisors, whether it's through the HKN leadership Slack team. There's a specific area in there for advisors. We have quarterly advisor roundtable discussions for advisors either to participate live or to watch, you know, recorded. We have newsletters that go out monthly as well, actually 2 of those, and even more too. So there are plentiful opportunities, though certainly more certainly will be done. But fundamentally, the advisor's role is to advise HKN, advise the chapter, be aware of what each is doing, and help communicate that. If, you know, from the chapter up, if, you know, maybe encourage your corresponding secretary, say, hey, you should send that into info@hkn.org, or let's fill out that form, and vice versa too. The student leadership conference is coming up. Let's all attend. This will be, you know, really interesting, a lot of fun. So it's, again, kind of taking the simplistic approach. It's not hard. It does take a little effort to be aware on both sides what's happening and encourage communication.
And I really appreciate, oh, go ahead, Jenny.
I was just going to say, building off of that,
Yeah.
in terms of being a voice, just having the presence to let the larger community know maybe what's working well for you, but also maybe what you need, whether that's connections, whether that's resources, so that the people who are leading the larger organization are aware, because it's impossible to know the inner workings of every single chapter. So kind of being an advocate for that as well, I think fits in that role.
Hear, hear.
And I really appreciate all of these perspectives. I think you bring up a number of good points of how advisors can synergize with the different parts of IEEE and greater organizations as an other honor society, other fields of technical interest, so on and so forth, to benefit the chapter. One to deviate from the script a little bit here, but one aspect that I think could be an interesting point of conversation is IEEE has a tremendous amount of tab societies, and especially many of our faculty advisors are members of one or more of these tab societies. And in terms of helping students link to professional organizations or professional communities to help grow their technical interest, is there a role for advisors to act as a bit of a bridge between their local chapters and these greater IEEE assets? And I asked this question to Michael.
So first, tab, thank you for bringing that up, technical activities. So, in some sense, the meat of IEEE, right? All the great technical things going on there on conferences, journals, all that. Absolutely. I'd also say grad students too, particularly doctoral students are, candidates in particular are also members. Some are serving in their technical society boards and committees and such as well, depending on what they're doing. So there's a wide world out there outside of HKN, both within IEEE and beyond. I think it's incumbent on every HKN member to try to bring new resources and opportunities to the chapter. And if you're a member of a society or more, whether it's a IEEE technical society or anything else, absolutely. For advisors, I would say I wouldn't make that a specific job responsibility. It's more, I think, incumbent on all of us just as a member in general, right? And also too, it's important to note that, again, communities, differences everywhere. So many of our chapters, and I review every single activity report that gets submitted, and I can tell you, many of our chapters find amazing speakers to come to campus and talk to the chapters. Others struggle. And we try to reach out to these chapters and say, there are actually opportunities right next door. Reach out to your faculty, see what their research interests are and whatnot, and maybe they can speak, or through their society connections, someone else could come speak. With the pandemic, virtual conferences and attendance now has become pretty commonplace. So you can get someone from halfway around the world to come and speak to a chapter, even if you're meeting in person, right? Have them projected up on a screen and have a phenomenal interaction. So I think the technical activities are a phenomenal resource that more folks should avail themselves of. With that said, I don't want to limit us to that simply because you never, the other thing too, when we plan the student leadership conference or other activities, we focus on technical skills, but then also soft skills, right? What some people call those, communication, interpersonal relationships, things like that. While those are critically important as well, and I really do hate the term soft skills, it really, if there's let's say even another student group on campus or in your community that focuses on presentation skills, connect with them, bring them in, right? There's very little along this line that could bring a chapter down, and it can only build it up.
Awesome. And Jenny, I'll ask you the same question.
Agreed. To me, it's one of a series of great resources for the chapter. I think the role of specifically, I think the faculty advisor might be to maybe make it a little more accessible than it can be, particularly for undergraduate student members who maybe don't know that they exist, or maybe they have trouble seeing themselves and how they fit in that larger community. Speakers certainly help with that. I think whenever you can get somebody that a student can identify with or say, oh, I would love to be in that place in 5, 10, 15, 20 years, whatever it may be on that. But I also really like the point of having a variety of speakers, of resources, because it is a fantastic resource, but everything doesn't have to be pulled from that as well. And the point of different types of speakers for different things. For example, I know I spoke to my chapter and it had nothing to do with my technical research and everything to do with what is grad school? What does it look like? And so it was just very much trying to break down barriers of things that are very opaque to students, and that a lot of times students will hear these terms, but they don't know what it means. And I think the technical societies fall in that umbrella of, maybe I've heard the term, but what does it mean to me? What can I get out of it? So just sharing, why am I a member? What do I get out of it? I think can really help them.
Awesome. And I thank you both for your perceptions on that. I think you bring up a number of good points. One more question I'd like to follow up with is speaking about both how advisors can aid chapters, but also how HKN can aid our advisors. Jenny, this is a question for you. What tools does HKN offer to help our advisors succeed? And especially as leading advisor initiatives for this year, what can we expect? I know Michael touched upon this briefly, but I was hoping to hit on this point another time.
Mhm. Certainly. I think one thing that we definitely want to do is to have greater communication with our advisors. And that's, setting up, like Michael mentioned, the roundtables, or new means, or taking advantage of leveraging the communication channels that exist, and maybe making them a little more specific to advisors. So whether that's a newsletter or a Slack channel, of trying to find out, how can I help you? And then setting up conversations. So between successful chapters, and success can mean whatever that means to you, but trying to find, what does your chapter need? But then also, much like I had that experience of onboarding with another faculty member, well, that may not be possible at other chapters. So in terms of resourcing, maybe starting to develop some onboarding resources, or some training of, what is your role? How do you find your role? And what does advising look like to you at your specific chapter as well? And it really falls under development and then support. So how do we help you develop as a chapter, as an advisor, but also listening to what support do you want, and just opening those lines of communication.
Now, one of the aspects that we mentioned is best for a chapter on having an advisor or multiple advisors is the fact that they offer as a great source of continuity within that chapter as a whole, and as well as carrying forward a long-term plan for the chapter amidst officer transitions and other, we'll say, perturbations that can occur, such as, a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic. But based off of this importance of continuity, I'm kind of curious, how can chapters plan ahead if an advisor chooses to step down or go on sabbatical? How can the chapter keep this forward momentum going on despite these challenges? And I'll start with Michael.
Oh, okay. Sounds good. There are a few things, and this is something we're looking to do more of this year as we go forward, but continuity planning, not necessarily for another pandemic, although if you want to, sure, but more so for, as we develop a lot of the resources that Jenny mentioned, and improve them, those that we have already, for officers too, right? What happens if, let's say, your chapter vice president has to, go abroad or go home or get sick, or, any number of things, hopefully good things, not bad, but they can no longer serve. Or, your advisor of 10 years, let's say they're offered to take a role at NSF or, NIH or whatever it might be, or a different institution. And they're going to be away from campus for maybe a short period of time or longer. So this is, again, one of the things that we really encourage is have multiple advisors. So someone, if you, like with Jenny, she came on as a co-advisor and then became the advisor when the first co-advisor moved on. Hopefully, the chapter too, and this differs a little bit by campus, but many departments, kind of as part of the faculty service requirement, will just select a faculty member to, serve the chapter, right? That's great. We also want the chapter to be involved in that selection process. So the chapter should be identifying and electing advisors themselves, working with the department chair or chairs. And that conversation starts now, not when you find out, oh, someone's leaving, right? But have this conversation to say, it'd be great to have someone else, even if they're not formally appointed as an advisor, have them, come to an officer meeting here or there, come to some events, kind of dangle their toes in the water, so that way, hopefully they want to be an advisor. But even if they don't hit that point, right away, they're in the loop and they know what's going on. The other thing too is, and this is something we're actually rolling out with a number of resources for this later this year, on advisor and officer transitions, passing the gavel ceremony type stuff. So a best practice out there is for each officer, each committee chair, each project leader, each whatever you call them in your chapter, right? And certainly advisors as well, to have either a binder or a wiki or just something to track kind of not just what they do day to day, that's perhaps a bit much, but overall, how do you do the job? How do you be a blank, whatever the role is? So that way, in the worst case, if someone steps down from the role, advisor or otherwise, someone else can look at that and say, okay, I have a basic understanding of what I need to do. I can work from this, right? So two things. One, never stop recruiting for every role, right? Current officers, as soon as they're elected, should be trying to figure out who the next officers are going to be. Advisors do the same thing. And, documenting things, but also too, developing those relationships.
And Jennifer, as someone who went through the experience of working as a co-advisor and seeing a successful transition between advisors, I'd love to get your opinion on the same topic.
Mhm. I think it comes down to planning and foresight. So if you can plan ahead and have that overlap, it's really helpful. So it is not a step change of we've gone along with one person for this long and now suddenly somebody's new and they may not know what to do. It could be they have a completely different style. So even if the style changes, which I think is inevitable because everyone's going to have different views on it, and that's wonderful to bring that in. But even having the advisor knowing what's been done in the past, I think is really helpful because you can do it in a meaningful way and also a planned way of, I'd like to go from here to here. Well, I know that we've done it this way. Maybe we do incremental changes as guided, hopefully, by the chapter. But also with that, certain things are inevitable. Like you brought up sabbatical. So there will be a year when I may not be on campus. And so I try to be cognizant of that in terms of documenting what does, or at least around our major events. So around induction, around kind of our core things, what does that look like? And what specifically do I need to do to have that done? So submitting our eligible members that we're going to induct. How do I fill out the form? How do I determine the eligible members? All of those little things, or seemingly little, but that if somebody just stepped in, that they may have no idea how to do those things, such that when my year comes, I can kind of just hand that folder to the next person, even if they only stay for that year, hopefully not, but then it's a seamless thing on that. The other thing is I know we have both a chapter, for example, a student chapter for IEEE and IEEE Eta Kappa Nu. I am not the faculty advisor for IEEE, but our e-board overlaps and also the faculty advisors keep each other updated. So having those conversations around, if you're a faculty advisor, the department over what are you all doing? Again, it's kind of that it's less daunting because they know what we do. They know induction's coming up. They know we do, we do a faculty student laser tag event. This is not something new that's just going to appear on their radar, but it really is with the officers in the same way, the documentation. So we have a Gmail account for each officer. In that, there is some rough document as far as what should you be doing in this role. And also planning in the academic year strategically, I think can help. So we try to have our induction earlier in the spring semester, knowing that then our officers have plenty of time to have their handoff meeting or whatever they call it. So they can sit down and they're not trying to sit down during finals or worse yet, after graduation, so that there's time. And so everything doesn't have to be rushed, whether it's a change of faculty, whether it's change of e-board, just looking ahead with that.
Absolutely. I would note too, and we're improving this consistently, but we send to every advisor and officers every month a reporting update. So to see, how many people do we think you've inducted? Does that match what you actually did? But also too, in that, all the activity reports the chapter submits, and anyone that receives that are able then to click on those links and see the full documentation. Those activity reports are available in perpetuity, right? So as part of the officer and certainly advisor transitions, you know, for the bigger things like the inductions, like how your signature events as a chapter, but also for other things too, those are a resource for advisors in particular, right? To say, if you have a new group coming in, perhaps less experienced than the prior one, certainly, as an advisor, you can give them a couple of those activity reports and say, this is what your predecessors did a year ago, 3 years ago, whatever it might be. In that, you can see the budget, the planning required, the source documents, right? So if they had a flyer, let's say the Word document version of the link to the Google Doc, whatever it might be. So that is a phenomenal resource there as well. But I really do, want to echo it and just support what Jenny said about having that binder, right? Whether digital, physical, combination, whatever it is, something in the Gmail account. It doesn't really matter as long as people know where it is, and that it's kind of the roadmap, right? We have on hkn.org the advisor timeline and handbook, which have been updated. So kind of in a very general context, what should an advisor be doing in a given academic term or year? But this is very generic, and it might be beneficial, honestly, for advisors out there now. Download that and then print it out, write on and say, okay, no, don't do this here. Do this here for us. That's why, have a local version of that, get it laminated, and put that in that binder, right? Because that way, just something to help populate that as well. But it really is critically important for the things that matter on your campus. And what matters on your campus will be different than another campus too, right? You might have a really special event that no one else does. To really document it well, in particular for the advisor, to not only know what their particular role is, but also too, if the students, let's say this disappears for a few years and it wants to come back, where can I go look to see what the students were doing to help a new group so they can bring it back? Right. So that's the flip side to it too.
Definitely. And I appreciate the emphasis on documentation on all parties. Just as a personal story and some encouragement to any advisors and chapter officers listening. I managed the officer onboarding for our chapter this year. I was the outgoing president. I wanted to work with the incoming e-board, and we had, quite a few resources on how to do much of the reporting and different events and so on and so forth. And I thought, this is going to be easy. Let's schedule, a 1-hour meeting. It's going to go well. Then all of a sudden, a 1-hour meeting became a 3-hour meeting, which became 2 3-hour meetings just to get the bare minimum out of the way. So the importance of, documentation to share information is critical. And even the little things can become tremendously important, especially for any incoming officers or advisors. So I really appreciate that perspective. In the interest of moving on, another great aspect of having an advisor is their role in conflict mitigation. I have 2 questions on this topic, and I'm going to ask the first one to Jennifer and the second one to Michael. So as for the first question, as an intersection between departments, chapters, and HKN, what is the role of an advisor in handling, or say, misunderstandings between these communities?
Sure. I think it starts with knowing what the role of HKN is and can be. So it can be, it depends on the situation, right? So if it is a genuine misunderstanding, sometimes those can be cleared up with, oh, actually, maybe that's not the place of HKN, or actually, maybe that really is the place for us. With all kind of conflict or disagreement, it comes down to who it is. And I think because we are the bridge, the glue, whatever you want to call it, we have those connections to hopefully help resolve whatever issues are appearing in that chapter by identifying maybe, okay, who should be weighing in on this, but also hopefully facilitating those discussions. And that can be among e-board members, it can be between the e-board and the members. If it's a faculty issue, hopefully we have the rapport to help maybe be a liaison between the chapter and the faculty member, because it looks very different from my end on that. But I think having the transparency to help identify what is the issue. Is it, I don't know this, or we have a fundamental disagreement or a different view on that? And then, okay, given if we do have a different view on that, well, maybe there's a place in between that we can meet. So we are hopefully from, again, I'm speaking from a faculty advisor perspective, but hopefully from teaching, from running, if you're running a research group or classroom, hopefully you have some experience with orchestrating maybe challenging conversations. I think lending that to the group is really helpful, and also not shying away from it. So if there is a disagreement, trying to resolve it instead of trying to just move beyond it. And all of that was very general, but I think it really comes down to what is the situation at play.
And I appreciate that perspective. And I think that's definitely an avenue that goes both ways, in the sense that chapter officers, if they find themselves entering a misunderstanding with other officers, another organization on campus, a department or whatever, it's important to translate that information to the advisors so you can, as a team, synergize a good plan to be able to rectify that issue. On the topic of conflict mitigation, and to move over to Michael, another form of, again, we'll say misunderstanding that we can see in the organization is more direct within the chapter between current officers and an advisor or the faculty advisor. Do you have any advice for a chapter that might be in a miscommunication between their officers and advisors, or advisors and officers?
Sure. Again, perspective is important. So I think step one is take a step back and determine, is the conflict something that you need to pursue, right? If it's a disagreement over, let's say, an event, right? Should we host this here or there, do this way or that way? It could be really important. It might not be, but take a step back, and I would encourage anyone involved in the dispute to do the same. Sleep on it for a day if you can, and see if it's still meaningful to you the next day. If it, on the other hand, it is something that is meaningful and it's perhaps more fundamental, right? So over, a chapter operation, something related to who we induct, how we induct. Perhaps there have been a case of, chapter officers feeling the advisors doing too much or too little, right? Or vice versa, the advisor feeling that, or advisors feeling this particular chapter officer isn't pulling their weight, whatever the issue might be. If having a third party is certainly beneficial. I would remind everyone that the committee, Chapters Mutual Committee, we're here to help. We have regional governors. Each chapter is in an IEEE region, which are also HKN regions conveniently. So reach out to your regional governor. If you don't know who that is, visit hkn.org. You can find out pretty easily. The student governors, Joe is one of them. This year is certainly a phenomenal resource. Our staff, Nancy Osen's our director. If you email info@hkn.org, it'll get to the right place or people. And we can also step in and help to understand what the conflict is, and to try to find a compromise where appropriate. I will say there have been some instances where an advisor has tried to hold the key to the gate, so to speak, as far as who the chapter can induct or can't induct. And the chapter officers were attempting to push back on that. We actually did come in and basically sit down with the advisor and the officers and explain, in this case, that's not a compromise situation. By the nature of what IEEE-HKN new is, so long as activities fall under the purview of our governing documents at the society level, and then the chapter's governing documents as well, like Jenny said earlier, the chapter's run by the students and the members. So it'd be educational. We try to be as obviously collegial as possible, and we are. Again, we want everyone's on the same team. We have to remember that too. Even if there's conflict, we all want what's best for the society and for the chapter. We might have different ways of getting there. So there's understanding on all sides, and also to working with those in conflict to try and find resolution, preferably compromise, and where possible, and where not, we can take different paths. But again, first and foremost, make sure the conflict is something that is actually a conflict, worth pursuing from your perspective, and then reach out to regional governor, to staff, to anybody else that we mentioned earlier, and we're here to help.
Yeah, and thanks for mentioning that, Michael. I think it is worth reiterating that as HKN, whether you're an officer, a member, or an advisor, we're always here to help, whether we're Board of Governor members, other volunteers on committees, or just, friends within the organization. If you find yourself in a struggle or having a question on how to properly even execute an event, or even some advice on how to have a conversation with an officer like Michael, again, chair of the Ritual Committee and chapters and membership, Jennifer, again, Region 3 to 4, regional governor, and myself, a student governor, we're all here to help. And we're excited to help in any capacity that we can. For the sake of time, I will move on to our last question of the day here. One important aspect about being an advisor, as we discussed before, is really synergizing our chapters with the overarching goals of HKN while helping chapters remain unique within the organization. To that end, and I'll start with Jennifer for this question, how can advisors help guide their chapters towards HKN's goals and initiatives? What goals do you have for your chapter over this next year?
Sure. I think the first step, as in many things that we've discussed today, is understanding. So what is the goal of Eta Kappa Nu, whether it's scholarship, service, leadership, all of those important aspects of it. If you understand who you are and what you stand for, you can identify those opportunities. And much like we've talked about, community as a huge theme among this, I think as far as goals for our chapter, one thing that we've talked a lot about this year is community. And that's community within Eta Kappa Nu, within the department, within the college, the university, all of those things. And I think we've been dealing with loss of community in a lot of ways over the past few semesters, but how do we come back from that? And what is an intentional way to do that? But also to learn from what worked well over the past year. So maybe community means we have some hybrid events or bringing in speakers from that, but taking a step back to intentionally grow that, and then really finding our presence on campus. So we have many, many student organizations on campus, and that is wonderful, but helping students, helping the chapter kind of form their own identity with a longer term vision. We are a newer chapter, and that's amazing, that's exciting, and the students are excited to build that. But much like I provide the continuity, we're starting to kind of form that longer term vision of who do we want to be 5-10 years out, and thinking about in an intentional way, how does that fit in the larger organization? So having a mix of all of those unique attributes of Eta Kappa Nu in our events, in our members, and keeping that in mind, I think really helps kind of form and set goals for the future.
And Michael, to turn the same question over to you.
Absolutely. I've been, as Jenny was speaking, I've been thinking on that, and it actually goes back to the last question too. One thing we didn't say with that was your fellow advisors can be a resource too, right? Beyond us. And that leads into this in the sense that we've talked about all sorts of different resources and opportunities available to advisors, officers, members in general. The Beta Epsilon chapter at the University of Michigan is in a similar boat, not that it's a newer chapter, but the world has been very different the last couple of years, and it's still evolving. The chapter, my goal for the chapter is we've seen a decrease in engagement, likely due to just the amount of time people have been spent apart. The chapter's done some amazing things to try and bridge that, but now as they're back together more and more, trying to rekindle some of that energy that was lost and hopefully not forgotten. Along with that, the chapter for a very long time ran a snack shop on campus, and that there were some, I won't say conflict, working to get that reopened. It's been closed for a few years now. HKN staff's been tremendously helpful with that. So working with my fellow advisors, those of us that actually been pursuing this since this all started, in getting that reopened, and then also training the chapter members on how to actually operate it once it's back up, because they're the ones who actually have to do it. They want it, but so that's a big piece too. So, helping to rekindle what was available, prior to 2020, I guess is a good way to put it, and then a very chapter specific goal of restarting what they call the DB Cafe, which really became the heart and soul of the chapter and the department too. Honestly, it's right in the building there.
I do just want to chime in with a bit of a funny story there, Michael. Speaking of the legendary snack shop on University of Michigan, I was talking with Jennifer on the onset of this, and she did her MS and PhD there, and that
She
that
did.
was one of the memories that she brought up was the snack shop. So to any chapter officers out there that thinks, how can I have an effect on my community? Sometimes it's the littlest things that create the most lasting memories. So
It's interesting too. The DB Cafe was open from about 9 a.m., 8:30 a.m. to 4:35. Pizza in the afternoon from Domino's, which
nice.
if I never have Domino's again, so be it. But it was a phenomenal thing if you're really hungry, and it's right there, and it's $1. But bagels and donuts in the morning, some snacks, whatnot. It's amazing for the candidates for induction that would work there.
Mhm.
The chapter co-runs it with the student branch. Just connection there, but also too people, whether from the department chair to members of the faculty to staff to construction
Wow.
workers to random person visiting to potentially attend the University of Michigan in a couple of years when they graduate from high school. It really was a hopping spot, for lack of a better way to put it, right? And the chapter took great pride in, and still does, in that. It also is a phenomenal revenue source. So, bring that back. It really, you can talk to alumni, they'll tell you about working at it, you eating there, and how they don't eat Domino's much anymore, but they still love it.
Well,
as Jenny probably knows.
well, thank you for sharing your experience there, Michael. I think that's a really cool story and a fun coincidence. But
Absolutely.
that's all the time we have for today. I first want to thank both of our guests, Jennifer and Michael, for sharing their awesome HKN journeys and experiences with us. If you like our HKN Connection podcast, you can find many more HKN initiatives on our recently renovated website at hkn.ieee.org. Also consider checking out our new podcast, Career Conversations, which tackles commonly faced challenges by young professionals entering the workforce. And you can find all of our recent episodes of Career Conversations on our YouTube channel. Most importantly, thank you all for your time, and thanks once again to our guests. Bye now.